So I'm going to attempt a live stream. So I'm on OBS again. I've changed the hardware settings. In order to try and not waste your time through these live streams, I'm also noticing that Edge or Microsoft have just released a preview of Edge for Mac, which is interesting because what does a new browser mean for testing? Right, Edge is typically a Windows browser. It was to replace IE. IE was a constant source of pain when testing because it was always completely different than every other browser. But now we've got Edge. Edge on Windows has a WebDriver, so we can automate Edge on Windows. And what are the difference between Edge on Windows as for Mac? Right, at some point we are going to have to learn the differences and see whether they actually impact our app or whether they're purely user experience. Because when we look at browsers, there are now so many browsers now, and if we try and test everything on all the browsers, then we simply won't have time. So we have to get in the habit of learning the technical differences and how our application interacts with the browser to assess risk. Otherwise, no one is going to be comfortable unless we test everything on all browsers, and that is simply impossible. So one of the interesting things for this is I'm reading this blog post from Microsoft, and I do not know whether the WebDriver is going to carry across. I don't know if Microsoft are creating a driver of Edge for Mac or not. It's not clear for me here. What I do see from here is that Edge is built on Chrome or Chromium. So we have a technical overlap. So Edge is using essentially the same engine as Chrome. How much is customized? Not sure. One of the interesting things in here, it says, if you encounter an issue and it reproduces on Chromium, then file a Chromium bug. So Microsoft are contributing to that. But there's also separate issue tracker for Edge. We have to understand whether our application is interacting at a Chromium level, a Chrome level, an Edge level. What is it playing with? And sometimes we're using a lot of external libraries and we don't know how well they play because we haven't tested them. We brought them into our project on the assumption that they are tested to be cross-browser. The programmers writing the code for the app aren't testing the libraries on every browser prior to bringing them into our project. And it's really as a team that we have to make decisions about technical risk in terms of how much do we have to test on different browsers, what functionality is at risk on some browsers as opposed to others. Some things that we can do to help are make sure that the HTML that is generated is standards compliant. It validates through parsers for checking for standard HTML. JavaScript can run in unit test frameworks on different browser much more easily than automating the app. There's a temptation to just run JavaScript tests through Node on simulated browsers. If we can get it running on real browsers, then we can de-risk some of the JavaScript. But as a team, everyone has to pretty much look at it and use their technical knowledge to assess the risk. Because if we don't, we have a kind of linear graph of, well, we tested all this on one browser, now we really should test all this on another browser, then all this on another. And that is just not acceptable. So we have the issue with testing that every time there's a new browser, people are going to want to use it, people are going to want to incorporate that into the scope of things that we test. But we won't have time, so we have to assess it on the basis of technical risk, which means understanding our application as well as humanly possible. Now I'm going to check to see how well my live stream did, but that's an interesting thing to have a look at and think about. How does your application interact with the browser? Which parts do you need to test? Which parts do you not need to test? And approach it from a technology level as well as a functionality level.